Good evening. I'm Paul Fredette, and with me here is Karen Fredette, my wife, and together we minister to hermits and to religious solitaries throughout the world through Raven's Bread Ministries, from here in our home in the mountains of western North Carolina. Over the past few months, we have tried to share with you our reflections about the life of hermits and solitaries, especially as we have experienced them together in the resurgence of this way of life in the latter half of the 20th and the beginnings of the 21st century. We've talked and shared with you and received your responses in many ways about the profile, the characteristics of hermits and solitaries, about the essential aspects of their life, about some of the helps and hazards, about the essential features that are truly the bedrock throughout the ages of what eremitic life is about. And more recently, in the past week or so, we've talked about even some of the practical considerations that are involved when someone may even be contemplating this kind of call in their own lives. But this evening, Karen and I would like to turn the focus to the future. We'd like to spend some time with you this evening looking ahead at what might be in store for eremitic life, for religious solitaries, and the role that they play in our world today. We're not the first generation to have asked this question about what lies in the future. But like every generation that's asked the question, we wonder whether or not we'll be the last. In the earliest days of Western Christian eremitic life, the story goes that, make sure that I get it completely right, the Holy Fathers came together and spoke of what would happen in the last generation. And one of them especially, called Squirion, said,
"We now fulfill the commandments of God."
Then the fathers asked him, "What about those who will come after us?"
Well, perhaps half of them will keep the commandments of God and will seek the eternal God.
And the fathers asked, "Those who come after these, what shall they do?"
The men of that generation will not have the works of God's commandments, and they will forget the precepts. At that time, wickedness will overflow, and the charity of many will grow cold. And there will come upon them a terrible testing. Those who will be found worthy in this testing will be better than we are, and better than our fathers even. They shall be happier and more perfectly proven in virtue.
The horizon is the point beyond which none of us can see. It's the apparent juncture between heaven and earth, between the sky and the land. Everything seems to either emanate from it or converge towards it. During the past half century or more, a sun has appeared low on the horizon of eremitic life. And we ask ourselves, is it its rising or its setting? are the figures that are silhouetted against the light. Figures like Thomas Merton especially, but also figures like William McNamara and Cynthia Bourgeault and Joan Sutherland and many others that we have referred to and cited in these presentations over these last few months. Are they growing larger and more clearly defined for us? Or are they slowly fading into one of those idyllic hazes? Is the allure of eremitic life a truly enduring aspect of humanity's search for meaning? Or is it a passing fad? Is it a fashion that intermittently comes in and out of vogue? Karen and I, and no one else we know, has a crystal ball to consult about this. But what we do have is the witness of millennia from which to draw maybe some tentative conclusions about the trends we see presently.
We said that one of our goals today is to begin to look at the future. We even have to ask, is there a future for eremitic life? When it comes to hermits, it's the same as artists or people of creative intent. People of power tend to regard these people as the most dangerous of individuals. For the work of a genuinely creative person mirrors the world around them with an uncomfortable truthfulness, revealing truths that often prove to be prophetic. And few of us, powerful or not, really enjoy the shocks that such windows of revelation can bring to us. We know that a great work of art rises like a tsunami out of the depths of the human spirit. A prescient artist detects subtle changes in the subconscious level, much like the slow shifting of the tectonic plates below the surface of the earth, that slow creep. Like seismographers who are measuring these and are aware of them, they are the people who can give advance warning of a social earthquake about to happen.
Right. Not all of us, in fact, very few of us, want to hear predictions of looming catastrophes. Most of us prefer to remain cocooned in ignorance. And some want to believe that the problems will all go away if we just shoot the messengers. Just think about how in so many totalitarian regimes over the past century and a half, we've seen that the prophetic voices, the poets, the painters, the sculptors, the playwrights, the singers, the songwriters, they're among the first to be targeted for persecution. I'm sure you can think of many. Some of them are the outstanding Russians who were sent to gulags during the early Stalinist years. What comes to my mind is Václav Havel, who was the playwright who was imprisoned for so long before becoming the president of the Czech Republic after the so-called Velvet Revolution, but for years was persecuted.
Hermits also are considered in that group of the equally dangerous. But the medium through which they speak and through which they express their vision is their very lifestyle. They are the prophets without a voice, so it would seem easy to ignore them.
Mm-hmm.
But their very silence tends to be extremely disturbing, and it implies a secret knowledge that can make people profoundly uneasy. By their very lifestyle, these hermits highlight uncomfortable and frequently frightening truths. For instance, even before the scientists were speaking aloud of changes in the Earth's atmosphere, those who were living close to the Earth, in communion with its deepest life, were aware that there were changes going on. These were the hermits who could know that the planet, our planet, was on the verge of drastic changes, and they were not for the better. They heard it, they saw it, they smelled it, and they fell on their knees.
Climate changes are imminent. And the animals are already adjusting or they're dying out. The first people to speak about global warming were ridiculed. But no one's laughing these days. Even though none of us can yet truly say why our atmospheric temperatures are rising, whether it is a cycle of nature, just as inevitable as the rotation of the planet, or is it the result of unwise and selfish choices that human beings have made in recent centuries? That's a question for the scientists to thrash out. But what the solitaries, by their life, have been proclaiming has been the corollary to global warming. And that's that the overheating that results from anger and greed and cruelty, the hot and frenzied emotions that generate toxic fumes, much like the greenhouse gases, which, as they build up, trap solar energies and prevent normal cooling, are also doing the same thing to the fabric of the human community.
Climate change, which affects all of us, is actually just a symbol of how interrelated we on our small globe have now become. The increasing number of hermits themselves alerts us to the fact that our social systems, as we know them, are breaking down. These men and women are absenting themselves from the human community, not because they hate people, but because they are profoundly uncomfortable in a culture that derides their deepest and held beliefs. In our culture, sometimes very little appears to be truly valued. Everything is disposable. Any place can be trashed. Appalling amounts of food are wasted. Anything can be replaced, even human body parts.
We've spoken several times about how central a hallmark to eremitic living is stability. We look about us today, human relationships, and how much superficiality there is. Well, with so many of the population moving away from one another or simply just moving too fast, it's hardly surprising. Doesn't anybody stand still anymore? Who lives in a house, a dwelling, even 5 years? People seem bored with their very existence, and in a restless search for meaning, They change their jobs. They relocate where they live. They find new partners. They reinvent themselves, as the catchphrase of today goes, and reinvent every aspect of their lives. Not once, not twice, but again and again and again. And our politicians and statesmen seek to arouse followers and crowds by doing what? By promising change.
Yes.
Envisioning a new life beyond not only their country, but sometimes even our planet. With little to advocate for that won't arouse opposition from some quarter, they offer fantasies about colonizing the moon or even Mars. Who would dare to promote staying put, sinking roots, deepening an inner life, exploring the world of the spirit? Only hermits, only lovers of solitude appear to fully embrace such a countercultural path.
As such, eremitical life can just simply be an incomprehensible option to society at large. But more and more people are being drawn towards its healing silence and genuine connection with the earth. By their life choice, some hermits hope to shock society into accepting responsibility for what is happening to our world and to initiate intelligent solutions. However, denial has become such an ingrained way of life that anyone who challenges a culture's carefully constructed house of cards, we could say house of lies, is considered dangerous, and as such, a profoundly frightening individual. We are at a place where we have to ask, where is honesty or ethical living to be found? Who can really be trusted?
We do know that in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus outlined the features of the ethical person. And to date, it seems no one has improved on that portrait. He spoke of people who were non-acquisitive, people who know how to grieve, people who are meek and who thirst for justice, people who are merciful, who are clean of heart, who are peacemakers. What would a society look like if the majority of its people embraced these ideals? Genuine hermits aspire to these virtues whether or not they come from the Christian tradition. The model that Jesus portrayed in words and especially in his life is simply the finest and the best that human beings can attain. We have to ask, is there a future for such people? Richard Rohr emphasized recently in a talk that Karen and I listened to that what we have in the Beatitudes as a construct, as an organizational principle for life, for living, is a second half of life project. And we've mentioned several times in these presentations that eremitic living is a second half of life calling. Rohr pointed out that the Ten Commandments serve as an excellent operating principle, a container, if you will, for the first half of life. But it is simply the container and the contents, what the commandments point to, and the goal of the commandments is what we have in the Beatitudes. That this is the direction that humanity has to move into. And certainly people of maturity and people who have attained a certain amount of individuation of grace and of wisdom.
Richard Rohr had named his book Falling Upward, because he said it's something that that falling has to happen to waken the person out of clinging to just the commandments and realizing they can't keep them, and then falling into this new vision, which is the Beatitudes. We look at hermits as people who should be living those Beatitudes. Like the Anawim, the little poor ones in the biblical language, hermits and solitaries are often ignored and insulted, persecuted and imprisoned. And why? Because their lifestyle speaks truth to power, quietly but subversively. They are the visionaries and the prophets who proclaim not catastrophe, but that a new world is possible, but at a price that the wealthy of our world are not willing to pay, a price that the poor of our world are so overwhelmed they can hardly envision. Only when the so-called developed nations begin to share their wealth with the other 2/3 of the world will there be a chance for all humanity to flourish. Only one country can flourish, and if only one country does flourish, the rest will fall, and that country will fall with it. Our earth will only survive if there is a more equitable distribution of its natural riches, something that hermits say by their lives, by their non-acquisitiveness, by their willingness to live with and for the poor.
If there is a future in eremitic life, hermits will have to be symbols of liberation. Images of how life on this earth could be lived if people put spiritual values first. A self-centered and frightened soul hears all the popular slogans promulgated by the ruling elite and mindlessly ingests them.
Mindlessly, yes.
Just think for a moment, even in the course of this week or this past weekend or this week, how many advertisements, how many commercial jingles, how many slogans, how many words have come across for your asking for your attention, and what were they all about? They were all about your satisfaction, your contentment, your pleasure, your achievement.
What you deserve.
Yes, what you deserve today.
You deserve a break.
The hermit of today and of tomorrow is called to reject these mind-numbing platitudes and promote a new paradigm, and by living them, dare other people to take them seriously. Solitaries will have to take on the work of all creative persons, which is a prophetic work, sometimes a dangerous work, because being different is never safe.
Some of you have seen pictures that astronomers have taken of stars exploding. It's quite a glorious sight. But we have been forced to ask if that same fate might also await our own beautiful blue-green planet. Wise people know that time is ticking faster as long as nuclear weapons continue to multiply. We're forced to ask how many seconds are left on our global clock. Where are those who hunger and thirst for saving justice? Who will be the peacemakers we so need? Whose hearts are simple and pure enough to weep healing tears over our present world?
As we've said before in some of these presentations, the cyclic popularity of eremitic life throughout the ages has long been recognized. In some periods, hermits are held in high esteem. At others, they're feared. Some eras consider all loners to be strange and abnormal. Other centuries revere solitaries as sages and guides. We could probably look back historically and say that when the dominant values of a society and a culture are religious ones, then those who are hermits and contemplatives are honored. And when the dominant values of a culture are materialistic, then hermits, solitaries, and the like are either tarred and feathered or shunned.
This is an age when, for the first time, one nation is capable of exterminating all life on our planet. If someone set off the right or terribly wrong chain reaction, all life could be wiped out on our planet in an incredibly short period of time. Never before has it been so crucial to foster peace on Earth, to redesign the social order. For such a major change to be effected, our world needs people who explore the frontiers of the human spirit. It requires hermits and solitaries who will live the Beatitudes, who by doing so care for the earth and all of us citizens.
What would hermits in the future, what will they have to look like? Well, many will live close to the earth, for sure, in peaceful, quiet places like mountains and deserts, in forests and on islands, for sure. But others will dwell where they directly experience the heartbeat of the world, in the great cities, where they will be hidden in plain sight. Many will serve in humble and hidden tasks, as did the hermits of the Middle Ages. Some might be healers or sages, whom the movers and shakers of our world will consult, aware that only these people hold the kind of healing vision that's capable of guiding the world through such critical times. But some hermits might be highly visible, but most will seldom, if ever, be seen.
Many will live an eremitical life outside any particular religious denomination, while others will be models of the spirituality found within their own chosen creed. But current trends suggest that a fair number of solitaries will develop a uniquely personal combination of spiritual traditions and practices, and by so doing will draw all humanity closer together. If you look at history, it's not hard to see that religious prejudice is one of the most potent elements for igniting wars and prolonging civil discord throughout, the most potent our world has ever seen. Think even of today. Since 9/11, how often people speak disparagingly of Islam. Have the Israelis and the Palestinians yet come to an agreement for peace? It's a battle that has gone on since Abraham fought with the Hittites, long before the time of Christ.
The hermits and the solitaries of the future will have to expand their sense of responsibility. Once they might have felt accountable only to people within their own culture or in their immediate vicinity. Now it seems that the solitaries of today and tomorrow have to even feel somehow responsible, answerable for the trash that's cluttering the solar system. Hermits need hearts that extend compassion from the villagers in Thailand to the teeming slums in Delhi, and concern for the continually slowly dying victims of Chernobyl, the people of Rwanda, the catastrophes and the disasters everywhere. It has become that small a world. By striving for communion with the divine, with the source of all being, hermits can introduce a new dimension of holiness into the world, one that can transform the threat of certain disaster into a promise that human hearts can be changed and charged with a caring love, with a divine compassion.
Such compassion is not easy for any of us, even for the hermits, and it can plunge them into what we might call a cosmic solitude and demand a courage that they will face all the fears of the universe. The genuine hermit actually burns with the passionate love of God, who bears the pain of all the peoples, of all ages, and becomes, in the words of Father Charles de Foucauld, the universal brother or sister. This means living in vital communion with all people, with all sentient beings. To grasp even the parameters of so vast a vision demands a heart that will not be daunted and will not be deterred. To accept that we have a world that's always in flux, will always be changing and careening continually from natural to man-made disasters, and that all things pay the price of the human penchant for conquest and control. Such genuine acceptance can actually threaten the hermit with a profound depression.
At least nightmares.
At least nightmares, yes.
God-touched hermits have nightmares. They have nightmares about the polar bears drowning because the northern ice cap is shrinking. They have nightmares about the seals and the penguins of Antarctica who have no place to raise their young because the glaciers are breaking up. They fear the future rushing toward us, one where snowpacks continue to shrink, both in the Rockies and in the Himalayas. And the once lush plains of our world turn to deserts. Some of the continents are drying out. Some are beginning to drown. How will there be sufficient food in those days to feed the children born now? But far from burying their heads in the sands of their chosen deserts, the hermits of the future will have to proclaim, as did the great Native American chief Seattle over 100 years ago, before anybody was talking about global warming, that, quote, humankind has not woven the web of life. We are but one thread within it, and whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. All things are bound together. All things connect. This is what the hermit of the future will have to say, not in words, but in their lives, boldly, clearly, unambiguously.
Our world needs more and better visionaries, prophets who can light the way in the growing gloom that threatens us and point out a direction that leads to a fuller life. It needs guides who, by their lives, can connect people to the spiritual energies which alone can transform our world and save it, which can save it by compassion. What sort of a person can shoulder such a burden and not be crushed by its weight? Who can save this sorry world of ours? Who can deliver our earth from the ugly fruits of violence and greed? It is only those who believe in the power of love that humanity can cease to be its own worst enemy. The hermit is the one called to be a channel of that compassion, which is another word for saving love. Contemplative prayer opens the human spirit to receive and transmit the salvation born of that kind of love. As a hermit's contemplative spirit matures, they realize, as did St. Francis of Assisi hundreds of years ago, that every element, every sentient being is our relative. Think, brother sun, sister moon, brother fire, sister water, even brother wolf. And because they accept the persecution that will come their way for love's sake, the kingdom of God will be theirs and hopefully also ours.
We'll continue our focus on the future next week, but now we ask you to join with us for some quiet prayer and meditation. We bless the light in the name of the one who creates life, in the name of the Savior who loves life, in the name of the Spirit who is the fire of life.
I'm asking you once again to allow yourself to be comfortable. Adjust any tight clothing. Kick off your shoes. Remove your glasses if you can. And loosen your belt if you wish. And breathe more slowly. Breathe deeply, quietly. Just attend to your breathing. If other thoughts come, allow them, then set them aside gently. Continue with your slow, steady breathing. Imagine yourself in the country. It is your favorite time of the year. The weather is perfect, perfectly suited to your taste and your mood. Look around and enjoy it. You are all together at ease, alone in this place. It might be a place familiar to you from your childhood or some other time during your life. Or it might be a place quite new to you. In either case, you are quite comfortable. Now you begin to take a walk. Do so, noticing the country around you. Not far in the distance, you see a house. Somehow you feel drawn to it. Walk toward it. As you come up to the house, you are only faintly surprised to find it is your name on the mailbox. There is no mail, not even a paper. But this does not surprise you either. You go up the walk to the front door and into the house. Explore your house. Somewhere inside that house, you find a door with your name over it. Look for that door. Under your name, there is one other word: tomorrow. You look at it and then go into the room. In a very special way, more than all the rest of the house, this room is yours. Take your time and examine the room carefully. Even though you have looked around the room carefully, there is one item you perhaps did not immediately notice. Over in a corner, or maybe against the wall, is a box. Find the box. Like many boxes, it has a label on it. It says hindrances. You know the box contains hindrances to your tomorrow. Open the box and pay very careful attention to its contents. Now do something with the contents of the box. Now it is time to leave that room which is yours. It is time to leave the house. Go back down the pathway, through the woods, and return to where you began your journey. Let the fantasy fade and slowly come back to your own time and place. Sit up. You may even want to stretch a little. Now it is time to begin to think and perhaps to write about your experience during this imagery. You need to take note of what the season and the weather was like for you. Did it have a special meaning? Is it perhaps your favorite season? People vary a great deal in their choice of weather. And now, your house. What was your house like? Large? Small? Modest? Pretentious? Was it well kept or in disrepair? How did your house impact you when you saw it? And then what was it like inside your house? How did you feel? Always pay attention to what you feel, for feelings never lie. What about that room with your name on it? And under your name, the word tomorrow. This guided imagery is being done for the purpose of planning for the immediate future. Not a 5 or 10-year plan, but a simple change that may be possible for tomorrow. That room that is yours, what did you find? Were you pleased with it? Did you like it? Or did it bother you in some way? What kind of room was it? Some people found a bedroom. Others found a study. Others found that it was a living room. In that room, that box you found that was marked hindrances, which you allowed to emerge imaginatively. What did you do with them? What did they say to you about your tomorrow? Whatever was in your box, a symbol, actual things, a certain knowing, I'd encourage you to look at it carefully. Let its meaning come to you and make some appropriate decisions as a result of it. If any of you wish to share with us and with others your experience of this guided imagery, we welcome you to get in touch. You can reach us through our website at pkfredette at Frontier. All right, our email at pkfredette@frontier.com, or you can go to the contact page on our website, which is ravensbreadministries.com. We'd welcome your responses. And if we do choose to share some, we'll always be careful of your anonymity.
Our meditation from Scripture this evening comes from John's first letter. This is the message we have heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. Whoever does not love is not truly alive. We know that we have passed from death to life if we love. This is why Jesus came, to make us truly alive. So let us love, not only in word and speech, but in truth and action. By this we know that we are of the truth. By this we can be sure within ourselves, even when our hearts condemn us. So, beloved friends, let us love one another, for love is of God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. And whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. Love was shown to us in Jesus. He laid down his life for us. And we should lay down our lives for one another. No one has ever seen God. But if we love one another, God lives in us. God is love. And those who live in love live in God, and God lives in them. There is no fear in love, for perfect love casts out fear. This is the message we have heard from the beginning, that those who love God should also love one another. In silence, or in whatever way our heart is moved wherever we are this evening, let us together give thanks for the day that has been and pray for the life of the world. For the darkness of the night enveloping the earth, enclosing this day's labor, we thank you, Most Holy One. For the quiet that surrounds us, and your promise of deep peace within us. For the stillness of sleep for our bodies, and the hope of healing for our souls. Thanks be to you, Most Holy One. This evening, we bring not only our weariness, but the tiredness of all people who struggled this night. We bring not only our own pains, but the sufferings of all those who cry out. Hear the prayers of our soul for rest, O God. Hear the prayer of our souls, of our hearts, for healing. Karen and I want to take this opportunity to thank you all again for joining with us for these special moments. We're particularly grateful for all those who have helped us with all kinds of suggestions and advice that have helped improve the quality of the presentations. And we look forward to being with you again next week. And now, the blessings of heaven, the blessings of earth, the blessings of sea and the sky, on those we love this night, and on every human family, the gifts of heaven, the gifts of earth, the gifts of sea and sky. God bless each of you, and good night.